Good afternoon, and on behalf of Natural Dharma Fellowship, I'd like to welcome everybody to Monday Night Meditation. Very happy to have Dean Slider here again to teach us more about the Buddha Dharma and the stories of J.D. Salinger. And this week's homework was two stories, Uncle Wiggily in Connecticut and Just Before the War with the Eskimos. I'm Elise Gittleman. I'm the Zoom host for Natural Dharma Fellowship. I'm going to do a quick tech talk, and then turn the show over to Dean. Sorry. We're reorganizing our house and someone made a big noise. I apologize. I think they're okay. So just quickly, when Dean's teaching or leading, he'll be in speaker view, but if you like gallery view, you can go to the upper right corner of your screen, hit the buttons, and see everybody in gallery view. You can turn on closed captions or turn them off using the CC button that should be at the bottom of your screen. During the meditation, the chat really is just for technical issues. If at any point Dean would like people to put stuff in the chat, you're welcome to do that, but while he's leading the meditation, probably will not be checking. It's really just if the sound's not working or something else. And what Dean was doing last week was asking people to either raise hands or unmute when they wanted to share when it's time. If you have trouble unmuting, you can sort of make a face and we can click a button that will help you a little bit. If for some reason you want to comment or chat without speaking, whatever that is, you can put that chat to me, the host, and I'll be happy to read it or ask it. However, and if you'd prefer not to be identified, that's okay too. I want people to remember the event is being recorded and will be posted on the internet for anyone who ever wants to hear it, when you speak, you're giving us permission to use the recording, and we cannot edit out what you say afterwards. And with that, I'm going to stop my share and turn it over to Dean. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much, Elise. Hi, folks. How's everybody doing? Good, good. Great to see a bunch of you again and some of you for the first time. So let's start with a little meditation, sitting comfortably, loosening up the body. And feel free to ignore any or all of what I say. I usually like to start, maybe we can start with just filling up the body with air, nice deep breath. And then filled up, hold, retain the breath, pull the ears up like you're sticking them in your shoulders, and then open the mouth, drop the shoulders, release. And again. And again. And now we just let the breath take care of itself. Let everything take care of itself, as it so nicely does. The senses function all by themselves, as we may notice, so that sounds come and go, sensations come and go, colors come and go. And we're not involved in the coming, the arising of those experiences. We're not involved in their going away. We have zero role to play. This is actually how things always are. We're just perhaps noticing it with a bit more clarity. And resting in that situation. Thoughts come and go. Feelings come and go. Everything comes and goes on its own. Nothing for us to do but remain as the natural open space within which the comings and goings take place. The open space we call being, just being. Or we call it awareness, just awareness. Just resting naturally as that open space. Nowhere to go and no way to get there. Just abiding as this beingness, this awareness, right here. Relaxing back into where we always already are. Now take a couple of minutes before opening the eyes and just start gently bringing the body back to a more active state. And then when you feel ready, you can slowly open the eyes. Okay, good, good. So, let me mention that if there's some particular reason you prefer to have your video off, that's fine. But otherwise, I like seeing the more faces I can see, the better. It's just more chummy, and I get the feedback. I know people are kind of getting what I'm saying. Also, I wanted to mention. I know some of you know this. I lead meditation free, open to everyone on Zoom 3 times a week. Anyone that's interested in connecting with that, just come to my website, deanslider.com. And you'll find there information about my books. I've written half a dozen books. The latest is particularly relevant to what we're doing here. There it is. Yeah, The Dharma Bum's Guide to Western Literature, Finding Nirvana in the Classics. I had a whole lot of fun writing this, and Jennifer, you're having fun reading it. Good, good, great. So I've got a chapter here on Salinger and, Shakespeare, Melville, Mark Twain, Dr. Seuss, all the biggies. And I have a lot of fun with all of them. Okay, so Uncle Wiggily in Connecticut. This thing's a masterpiece. I'm really excited to be talking about this. So, what's going on here? Right? 2 old college friends getting together at the suburban Connecticut home of one of them, and it becomes an afternoon of serious drinking. Okay, pouring the highballs, and we have a little encounter with the daughter of the hostess, Eloise, and we have eventually the revelation of the tragic death of her wartime boyfriend, Walt. Basically, that's what happens. That's the text. But what's really happening? What's the subtext here? What's the subtext? Those of you, I think most of you were here last week, and the big point that I made is that in the art of the short story is economy. Nothing is superfluous. There's no room, unlike a novel. There's no room to have anything that's optional. And these Salinger short stories are just shining examples of how every word, every name, every detail contributes to the whole experience, contributes to the theme. So none of the names are going to be arbitrary. So what are the names of our two heroines, right? Eloise is the hostess, and Mary Jane is the one that's visiting her. Do either of those names suggest anything to you? Anybody, raise your hand. I'll unmute you. Anyone get any association for? Yes, Pauline.
Is whoops.
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, is Eloise there was stories about a young girl named Eloise many years ago?
Yeah, yeah, right.
And
Written around this time. Eloise, who lives in the tippy top floor of the which hotel is it with the palm court at the bottom?
yes, yeah, that's
Y-
the one.
Yeah, yeah, off of Central Park. In fact, if you go in the lobby there, they have an oil painting of Eloise hanging in the lobby. The Plaza Hotel, of course. Right. But the thing about Eloise is she's a poor little rich girl. She's got the whole run of this hotel. She's got Manhattan at her feet, but she's taken care of by a nanny. There's no parents around. She's a poor little rich girl. She's living in isolation. Right. That's Eloise. Ring a bell here. Here's Eloise with, okay, fine. You've got, of course, even the name Connecticut. Connecticut, particularly, well, even now, but at the time this was written in the late 40s, Connecticut, that was becoming, that's upper middle class to upper class suburbs for the guys working in New York and, commuting on the train, and they come then the end of the day, you take the train to the station. Wifey picks you up in the station wagon, and she's got martinis or highballs waiting when you come home. Right. So here's this from one point of view, more or less ideal, from a material point of view, existence, and yet she's miserable. Clearly. Gets more and more clear the drunker she gets. It's the old saying, in vino veritas. In a way, this whole thing's a therapy session. As the gals get drunker, more and more their tongues get looser, more truth tumbles out, and a lot of it's not pretty. Okay, what about Mary Jane? What about that name? When I used to teach this at Pingree School, my students used to want to associate Mary Jane with marijuana, which would make sense if it were written a decade or two later. But it's too early for that reference for white suburban people. Maybe if you were a jazz musician. Yes,
Yeah,
Elise.
Mary Janes are a kind of shoe.
Yes, yes. There were shoes for little girls, like saddle shoes for little girls.
Yeah,
So it suggests a little girl's innocence, doesn't it?
yeah.
Doesn't it? When Mary Jane comes into the living room and sits down, I'm telling you now, nothing's wasted here. Anyone remember what color chair she sits in? She sits in a blue chair. She sits in a blue chair. A blue is the color of the Virgin Mary. When you look at Christian religious art, she's always wearing blue or got a blue background, right? So blue sky, innocence. She's our representative in this story, right? She's kind of the innocent listener, who, I mean, in a way, they're no one's innocent. The whole thing starts. All their chatting for the first several pages is, they're just dishing. They're so catty. But Eloise is worse, isn't she? Right? When Mary Jane tells her the news of a professor of theirs who died of cancer and was down to 62 pounds, and she says, "Isn't that terrible?" And Eloise says, "Nope." And Mary Jane says, "Eloise, you've gotten hard as nails." Right? So you see, a mystery is being laid out in front of us. What has happened to Eloise that's made her like this? Why is she so bitter? What's the cause of her suffering? Now, Buddha Dharma, right? What is the cause of suffering? This is right in our wheelhouse, isn't it? They're suffering, and what's the point? And David's pointing to himself, because David is the cause of all suffering. No, this, of course, the self. We cause our own suffering. Second noble truth. I mentioned this last week. Salinger eventually did deep investigation of Buddhist teaching, had Zen teachers. Around the time he was writing these stories for the New Yorker, he started studying at the Vedanta Society in New York. But at the time that he wrote this, a lot of his formal training in Dharma had not happened yet. And in a way, that's lovely. By the time we get to the last story in the book, Teddy, as you'll see, the Dharma teaching is very explicit. But here it's still more implicit. It's still almost more intuitive, I think, a lot of it from Salinger's side. I think we're seeing what he was intuiting and discovering about life, and then was going to find that is all laid out in Buddha Dharma. Also, did anyone notice all the images of things being spoiled and dirty? Right, the very beginning, they've got this. They're set up to have lunch together, but Mary Jane gets lost on the way. So their plans are messed up. The whole lunch is ruined. It's burnt, says Eloise. The sweetbreads, everything. We're told on the first page, Mary Jane was back in a minute using a leaf of Kleenex and still looking upset, even fouled. Right? Why is she in Connecticut in the first place? She's on her way to take papers to her boss who's had a hernia. Right, it's a hernia, a flaw. We're told that the snow is turning to filthy slush. At one point, Mary Jane runs her finger along the windowsill and finds grit on it. Right, things have gotten soiled, they've gotten fouled, they've gotten spoiled. How has this happened? So, okay, there's a reference to the maid, that dopey maid. Right, Eloise at the bottom of 20. Looking for cigarettes. That dopey maid, Eloise said, without moving from the couch. I dropped 2 brand new cartons in front of her nose about an hour ago. She'll be in any minute to ask me what to do with them. Where the hell was I? And then the next page, on page 22, Eloise goes out for the cigarettes. She comes back, and talking of the maid, she's sitting on her big black butt reading The Robe. The Robe was a popular, best-selling novel at the time, and became a movie. It was about Jesus and people around Jesus. So here's the maid reading about spirituality instead of, the nerve. She's pursuing something spiritual instead of being at the ready to fetch cigarettes for her boss. What's the maid's name? We need to pay attention to every name in every one of these stories. Yeah, David. Grace. Yes, the maid is named Grace. Isn't that interesting? Okay, we'll come back to her. We'll come back to her. But now things get really interesting when the daughter, Ramona, comes in. And we first hear her as a voice, and we hear her saying, "Come on, Jimmy." All right? And we see her with her thick counter myopia lenses, right? Myopia is nearsightedness. So what does this little girl look like? She's got thick, she's nearly blind. She's got big, thick lenses. Mom keeps trying to make her stop picking her nose, stand up straight. And then on page 26, we find out about her imaginary friend, Jimmy Jimmerino. Well, that's quite a name. This is just above the middle of 26. Mary Jane says, "Well, that's quite a name. Where is Jimmy? Will you tell me, Ramona?" "Here," said Ramona. Mary Jane looked around, then looked back at Ramona, smiling as provocatively as possible. "Here where, honey?" "Here," said Ramona. "I'm holding his hand." Some of you may have had encounters with your teachers, right? Asking them, "Well, where is this? Where is this luminous void you keep talking about?" That's here. "Where is this kingdom of heaven?" "Here." Right? Kingdom of heaven is within you. Gospel of Luke. Gospel of Thomas. Kingdom of heaven is spread upon the earth, but people don't see it. Here. I'm holding his hand. Right? Takes Mary Jane a little while to catch on. Near the bottom of the page, 26, Eloise says, "Stand up, please. Tell Mary Jane how Jimmy looks. He has green eyes and black hair." "What else?" "No mommy and no daddy." "What else?" "No freckles." "What else?" "A sword." Okay, what are you getting from this description of Jimmy Jimmerino? Anything? Anybody? Yeah, Bryant.
I think the no mommy, no daddy jumps out at me as a little child's intuition that her own mommy and dad, like, she doesn't like, she thinks there's something amiss with mommies and daddies,
Yeah.
and she's intuiting her own folks. There might not be everything right in the castle. And so when she makes an imaginary friend, she's going to do it right. And here there's no mommy and daddy. So everything's nice.
Yeah.
And maybe the sword, well, you're probably getting to that, but
No, go ahead. What's
well,
the
just
sword say to you?
the sword says to me that, this is a child that doesn't feel safe. And she's had to imagine a defender,
Yeah.
a defender that doesn't have any baggage of parents. He's just for her, and he's got a sword. So,
Yeah.
and that's just complete conjecture on my part. But it's
That's all. That's all we're doing here. That's all I'm ever doing. But yeah, a protector. And yeah, and an orphan as she is emotionally. And as her mother is, as Eloise is, right? Eloise named for, right? Eloise at the Plaza Hotel, the feeling of being isolated, being on your own. And of course, green eyes and black hair puts us in the realm of imagination because it would be people with green eyes generally are going to have fair hair, So he's unusual. No mommy and daddy, no freckles. a sword. Yeah, he's a protector. And when Mary Jane asks him if he has galoshes too, because she's been sent out, right? Again, Eloise is not going to take the kid's galoshes off. She sends her out, have the maid do that, right? No, he doesn't have galoshes. He has boots, right? Because he's a soldier. He's a hero. And then this wonderful thing, Eloise, of course, is sick about hearing sick of hearing about Jimmy Jimmerino. I get it all day long. Jimmy eats with her, takes a bath with her, sleeps with her. She sleeps way over to one side of the bed so as not to roll over and hurt him. Okay. So all this is being set up. Then we hear, so little time passes, some more drinks are consumed, and then we start to hearing about Walt, Eloise's wartime boyfriend, right? And what is Walt like? He was the only boy, I'm on 28, he was the only boy I ever knew that could make me laugh. I mean, really laugh. And then we get these wonderful examples of the time that she fell and twisted her ankle, and he was petting her ankle and saying over and over again, "Poor Uncle Wiggily, poor old Uncle Wiggily." Now, Uncle Wiggily was the central character of a series, incredibly numerous, hundreds of books by this very prolific children's book author named Howard Garris, I believe. And Uncle Wiggily on the Farm, Uncle Wiggily Learns to Ice Skate, Uncle Wiggily in Magic Land, Uncle Wiggily in Wonderland. Right? Uncle Wiggily was a rabbit who wore a top hat, and if you just Google it, look at images. These books were around for so long, they went through at least 4 or 5 different illustrators, so you'll see the styles are very different. I like the old creepy ones. So he's got a top hat and spectacles, and he always has a crutch because he has rheumatism. Poor old Uncle Wiggily. He's got rheumatism. We never see him without his crutch. And I have not been able to track it down because there's so many of those books, and I'm not willing to read them all. But I would bet money that in one of them he gets caught in a trap or something, and that the text of the book says, "Poor old Uncle Wiggily." Some more diligent scholar than I am someday will hopefully confirm that. So here we have Uncle Wiggily in Connecticut. Right? Caught in a trap, or at least hurting, never without the crutch, never without the rheumatism. Can we see there's some more here about the universality of suffering? And that what this story is Uncle Wiggily in Connecticut. How does the universality of suffering play out in this specific scenario here of, embittered post-war middle-class existence? So Walt was different. Walt had something. He was funny and sweet in a way that she never saw in anyone else. Doesn't Lou have a sense of humor? Mary Jane asks. Well, he laughs at cartoons and stuff. Right? We start to get the idea. Lou is Mr. Potato Head. I'm sorry. Lou is a lump. Lou is a lump. How did Lou, right? Mary Jane asked her, well, why'd you marry him? Why'd you marry him? This is devastating. Top of page 32. Oh God, I don't know. He told me he loved Jane Austen. He told me her books meant a great deal to him. That's exactly what he said. I found out after we were married that he hadn't even read one of her books. Oh man, faking sensitivity? I mean, lacking all sensitivity is one thing, but faking it to get the girl? Ooh, that's bad. That's bad. Right? And again, what's wonderful about a writer like Salinger, and especially in the, tight economical short story, is you don't spell out all this stuff that I'm so clumsily spelling out. It's all show, don't tell. We don't have to say Lou is a, big blob. We're shown it by the specific, by the details. What his favorite author is L. Manning Vines. This is a made up name, who wrote about guys starving to death in Alaska. Yeah, Barbara? Unmute.
Just, I just have a general question. I grew up on the East Coast in the 60s, and I can identify a lot with where he's coming from. But in his creative process, when he's writing these tight, where almost every sentence means something else or is symbolic, indicative, is he aware of that when he's writing it? Or does he go back and craft it and juxtapose words, or say, hey, I'll call her Grace? I mean, I don't understand how he can have all this packed into one little thing.
Yeah, if you can,
So,
if you can figure out how it's done, I can't wait to read your stories.
I just mean, it seems so. How much is it intuitive, or how much does it have to work at it? To get all this complexity.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't there to watch him write, and he famously, once he became successful and famous with The Catcher in the Rye, he famously left New York and isolated himself on a little farm in New Hampshire, and wrote. He had a little writing cottage that he went out to every day. So we don't know what his process was, but in general, from what I know about writers in general, and from what I know about my own experience of writing, it's all of the above. Some stuff comes intuitively; you don't know where it came from. Some stuff then you get something on the page. I'll tell you, my main experience of writing is that I'll go to the computer and I'll start to write, and immediately I say, oh man, I'm writing shit. This is why did I ever think I could do this? I'm going to have to call the publisher in deep shame and refund their advance because I can't do this. But fortunately, at some point I remember, wait a minute, I've been through this before. And if you're writing shit, just write more shit and write more shit. And after a while, it starts to become less shitty, and then you pick up some momentum, and then stuff starts to come. And sometimes you've got ahead of time, if I do this and call this, and then some of it comes when you're the best is when you're just rolling. It's like jazz musicians when they're cooking. And when you listen to the best jazz musicians, when they're on these flights of improvisation, you go, where is that coming from? How is Coltrane coming up with this? That is nowhere in the scale, in the key that he's playing in, but he plays that note and he makes it work. How does he do that? And the great thing about jazz is, there's no time to stop and think about it.
Right.
Whereas with writing, there is time to go back and go back but some of the I can tell when I reread my own writing, which usually I don't, but once in a while I will. I can tell when I come to a page where I was really just totally in the zone and it was just coming. I can feel the energy shift as I'm rereading it. Yeah, I was really on it there.
Okay.
Yeah, Brian? Unmute, please. Yes.
Like a 4-step process to unmute. Yeah, what you reminded me of, and we don't know J.D. Salinger's method, of course, but I read about Jack Kerouac, famously taping together this long roll of paper and then feeding it continuously while he was on Benzedrine typing on the road.
Yes.
And one assumes that it was literally just a nonstop, start to finish rush. That being said, I don't know if he ever went back or anyone went back and edited it. I'm assuming probably, but
there was some. By the way, he didn't actually tape it together. He took telegraph paper, which comes in
okay.
or came in a long roll, and some people read on the roll on the road and say, "Oh man, this is just the most electrical, inspiring, exciting thing I've ever read." And some people say the most famous critique of On the Road was from Truman Capote, who said, "That's not writing, that's typing."
Typing, yeah.
And I kind of feel some of in between. We do know that these stories, which were written for the New Yorker, we do know about something about the process, at least for the first story, Perfect Day for Banana Fish. In his first draft, where it was called The Banana Fish, the whole first half with Muriel on the phone with her mother was not there. It started with Seymour on the beach with the little girl, with Sybil. And the editor, the New Yorker editor, who, by the way, this book it's dedicated to two people, and one of them is I don't know who Dorothy Olding was, but Gus Lebrano was his editor at the New Yorker. So that was a gracious thing to do in the dedication. So Gus Lebrano told him, "Wait, it's not making sense. Why is Seymour doing this? You've got to give us the backstory." And so he came up with the first half. We like to think of our great authors as just geniuses who come out with this stuff fully formed. Some of them, the editor is crucial. The most famous editor of that whole period, Maxwell Perkins, who edited Hemingway and Fitzgerald, and a whole lot of what we know of the greatness of Fitzgerald and the greatness of the very different Hemingway is thanks to Maxwell Perkins. And if you have not seen it, there's a wonderful documentary called Turn Every Page, The Adventure of Robert Caro and Robert Gottlieb. Okay, Robert Caro is the great living historian who wrote The Power Broker about Robert Moses, who gave the shape to modern New York, and then wrote and is still writing now the 5th volume of this incredible, massive biography of Lyndon Johnson. And Robert Gottlieb, who was the editor-in-chief of the New Yorker for a while, has been his editor on everything and has been the editor for everyone else. He edited Catch-22. But watch this documentary. It is so delightful. Turn every page. And it'll tell you so much. And Barbara, it will really address a lot of your question about how does the process work. And speaking of movies, Uncle Wiggily in Connecticut is the only Salinger work to be made into a film. A not recommended film. called My Foolish Heart. And maybe you get some feeling from the title. It was a kind of a sappy, sentimental post-war film starring the gorgeous Susan Hayward, and the whole backstory with Walt and the army and everything. It's all there, rather than letting this drunken afternoon speak for itself. But the one good thing to come out of the film was the theme song, My Foolish Heart, which has become a great jazz standard. And do yourself a big favor and get on YouTube and listen to Bill Evans play My Foolish Heart. Oh my God. You can get through that with a dry eye. You're a stronger man than I am. So then we get the story about Walt. What happened? Before we get to what happened to Walt, the great thing on the page, this brilliant thing, bottom of page 30, the last paragraph. You know what he said once? He said he felt he was advancing in the army, but in a different direction from everybody else. He said that when he'd get his first promotion, instead of getting stripes, he'd have his sleeves taken away from him. He said when he'd get to be a general, he'd be stark naked. All he'd be wearing would be a little infantry button in his navel. Okay, that's hilarious. What does he describe? I mean, that's so wacky. That is so out there. But what is it saying there? What is his idea of achievement? Walt's idea of achievement, right? What is the status that Walt wants? Yeah, it's to have. It's yeah, Brian. Okay, I'm going to keep going because I'm starting to feel time pressure. It's to have no status, right? It's to have non-achievement. This is Zen achievement, right? Unlike the very opposite of Lou, who every time Lou meets a man, the first thing he wants to know is what was his rank, right? That big dope, right? The Army's a perfect place for someone like Lou, someone who believes that status is something real. You wear it on your sleeve, literally. Right? Whereas for Walt, the idea is go back to go to less. It's like becoming a monk, losing everything. It's like it's going back to innocence. It's going back to beginner's mind. It's going back to Adam and Eve, right? Naked in the Garden of Eden and unashamed. It's innocence. Right? But then what happens to him? Yeah, I'm sorry. Perry, were you raising your hand? Unmute, please. You can't unmute.
I get a sign that says I can't unmute except the host has to do it.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know what.
Oh, okay. I had to click ask to unmute. Then you. Okay, sorry. Okay,
Sorry.
you got it now.
I was saying that maybe if he's in war, and I don't know if he was in battle, but every act that he makes, he doesn't feel it should be. You get prizes for it. You reduce. You should be taking something away,
Right.
not necessarily getting more.
Yeah.
And I understand through your point of view that it's like stripping down to purity, but it's sort of like not rewarded for awful acts because war's not.
Yeah. That all works. That all works for me. Also reminds me, those of you who've read Catch-22, Yossarian, who hides or burns or something, somehow gets rid of his uniform and he just sits in a tree naked, figuring that way they can't ship him into battle. They can't send him up on any more missions. So this wonderful thing of not believing in rank, not believing in status, not believing in all the, and by implication, all the artificial attributes, all the artificial narratives of selfhood that we generate for ourselves, but wanting to go back to the innocence, to the Zen mind, the beginner's mind. But what happens to him? Finally, when she's finally drunk enough, Eloise finally shares the story she's never told Mary Jane before of how Walt died somewhere between battles, right? Not even in battle, not even killed in action, packing a souvenir Japanese stove that was full of gasoline for a colonel, and it exploded in his face. The other soldier only lost an eye. Right? Packing it for a colonel. Okay, Walt doesn't believe in rank, but guess what? Rank gets him in the end. We may not believe in status. We may not believe in achievement. We may not believe in the great value of money and all that stuff. But somehow, the people who have those things have a tendency to rule our lives and our deaths. And that's tragic. That's awful. That's something we don't want to know. Right? And maybe that's the answer in a way to, why'd you marry Lou? Well, she tried the innocent, poetic, sweet, sensitive guy. That didn't work out, and just kind of the rebound thing went to the opposite. Maybe something like that. Okay, we got to move along here. Jimmy gets runned over. The phone rings. They wake up to the phone ringing. And it's Lou wants to be picked up at the station. Right? In the station wagon. And at this point, why don't you, oh, well, that's tough, kid. Why don't you boys form a platoon and march home? You can say that hut, hope, hoop, hoop business. You can be the big shot. Oh, man, is she drunk, and is she nasty. We've seen her be nasty to just about everyone at this point, including her daughter, including, then the light is turned on. Who turns on the light? Grace turns on the light. This is almost embarrassing. It's so on the nose. Grace turned, they're lying there in drunken darkness. And it's page 35, 3/4 of the way down. When Grace turned on the light in the dining room, Eloise jumped, blah, blah, blah. And Grace asked her, Ms. Wangler, I wondered if it'd be all right if my husband passed the evening here. I got plenty of room in my room. I don't have to be back in New York till tomorrow morning. And it's so bad outside. And what's her response? I'm not running a hotel. What would it cost her to let Grace's husband stay, right? She doesn't even realize that he's in the other end of the presumably big house. What would it cost her? Nothing. This is what happens to bitter people. They have a tendency to dig in. Let's share the wealth. Let's share the suffering. Right? Can you see this is, what if Eloise responded differently here? Can you see this would be a chance to redeem herself? This would be a chance at grace, to attain grace, to embrace grace. But she misses that chance. All right. And then she goes into Ramona's room. Oh, man. Throws the gouache. She's just drunk and miserable and pissed. and we find out that we already found out Jimmy Jimmerino's been run over, but Ramona's still sleeping at the edge of the bed. So what's going on here? She wakes her up. I thought you told me Jimmy Jimmerino was run over and killed. What? You heard me. Why are you sleeping way over here? Because, said Ramona. Because why? Ramona, I don't feel like, because I don't want to hurt Mickey. Who? Mickey, said Ramona, rubbing her nose. Mickey Micarano. Eloise raised her voice to a shriek. You get in the center of that bed. Go on. And she finally grabs her by the ankles and drags her into the center of the bed. Why is she so mad here? Why is she so mad?
She has
Yeah,
no
Perry?
control. She has no control.
She has no control.
I mean, and everything's happening to her, and she's fighting back.
Yeah.
She's so angry. She's so mean.
She's so mean. Yeah, she's awful. And there's something else. Ramona's imaginary soldier boyfriend got killed. He got run over. So what does Ramona do? She's replaced him. No problem. You just replace him. Does that ring a bell? That's what Eloise did when her soldier boyfriend was killed. Right? But it ain't that easy, kid. It ain't that easy. Don't think you can do it that easily. That infuriates her because she sees herself there. That's what she's done. Yeah, Bryant?
Sorry, that hand raise was from earlier.
That's an
I
old
forgot to take it
hand.
down.
Okay.
An old hand.
An old hand. You're an old hand. Okay.
A goat hand.
Okay. So at this point, we've reached the depths. We've reached the ninth circle of hellish suffering here. Right? And then page 37, 2/3 of the way down. Halfway down. Close your eyes. You heard me. Close them. Ramona closed her eyes. Eloise went over to the light switch and flicked it off. Now imagine, if you will, that Salinger ended the story right there. Which, Barbara, that might have occurred to him. Maybe I'll go there. This is a miserable story. Brilliant, miserable profile of suffering and how we generate it and how we inflict it on ourselves. And it would end with switching off the light. Boy, that would be pretty perfect. But Salinger goes a different way. Next comes the most important word in this whole story. But. But she stood for a long time in the doorway. And now almost the most beautiful thing in the story is what Salinger does not say here. Because in a moment she's going to do something very different. Right? Then suddenly she rushed in the dark over to the night table, banging her knee against the foot of the bed, but too full of purpose to feel pain. She picked up Ramona's glasses and, holding them in both hands, pressed them against her cheek. Tears rolled down her face, wetting the lenses. Poor Uncle Wiggily, she said over and over again. Finally, she put the glasses back on the night table, lenses down. What happened while she stood there for a long time by the light switch? I think she had a moment of clarity. I think she bottomed out. She reached the ninth circle of her drunken, bitter hell and saw herself and saw what she was doing, passing the misery on to the next generation, to her daughter. Saw that we're all in this boat. We're all poor Uncle Wiggily. We all have our crutch. Ramona's crutch is these thick glasses that she has to wear. Right? This is maybe the most important moment in Eloise's life. This is the moment she bottoms out. And rushes back, and then she kisses her wetly. Yeah, Barbara? Unmute, please. Yeah.
I was just going to say one teeny tiny thing. In that same line, she finally put the glasses back, lenses down.
Yeah.
And a couple pages back, when they were talking about Ramona going to bed, she put it with the arms down.
Right.
So she might have had a bit of clarity, but it went away. I think it's almost an aggressive thing, I think,
Yeah.
to put the glasses down the wrong way.
Yeah. It's
To
not. It's definitely not arbitrary. It's
right.
too crisp to not indicate something. I suspect that it indicates, yeah, suffering is universal, but I don't need for my child to know it yet. I don't need for my child to see it yet. And one reason that I suspect that, one of the stories we're not going to discuss, but please read it. I mean, please read this whole book, but read Down at the Dinghy. And when you read Down at the Dinghy, when you get to the end of Down at the Dinghy, you'll see that that theme is very similar. The child gets a reprieve. We can't all remain innocent forever. We all have to become, corrupted by the knowledge of suffering eventually, but not yet. The kid gets another round of innocence for a little while, right? And then we get to the very end. I want to move on here to the next one, but the very end, where drunkenly she crashes back into the living room and shakes Mary Jane awake. Mary Jane, listen, please, Eloise said, sobbing. You remember our freshman year, and I had that brown and yellow dress I bought in Boise, and Miriam Ball told me nobody wore those kind of dresses in New York, and I cried all night. Eloise shook Mary Jane's arm. I was a nice girl, she pleaded, wasn't I? Oh. Can you all feel that? I was a nice girl. She's reaching back into her innocence. And we can see everything she's done, everything she's said in this whole story, all those layers of cattiness, it's all that armor. And all that armor has not helped her. And now finally she's bottomed out and she's reaching back to when she was just a hick from Boise, Idaho, before she put on all this New York sophistication, when she was still vulnerable. It's like she successfully reached back to the moment where her vulnerability caused her to be hurt and maybe decided, I'm not going to let that happen again. And again, when we unpack this stuff, when we talk it all out explicitly like this, it's all kind of clumsy and right. And the glory of it is that Salinger doesn't say any of this, but it's all there. Pretty good. Okay, we got to romp through just before the war with the Eskimos, right? But now our radar has been sharpened. We'll be able to pick this stuff up nice and quick. Okay, it's another story of an outsider, a visitor, coming to visit someone in their lair. Ginny Maddox. I'm going to go fast here. I apologize, but Ginny's short for Virginia. Again, I think that's innocence. Virginia's virgin, right? Again, she's pretty much the outsider. She's pretty much just the observer. She's us, right? But she goes there. She goes to Selena's apartment with a purpose to get paid back for all the cab fares from their tennis dates. So she's going there to get some, get some moolah, get some silver. At the end of the story, Ginny finally comes out of her mother's bedroom with the money to pay her. Selina comes out of her mother's bedroom to pay Ginny, and Ginny says, "No, never mind, I don't need it." What? What's happened there? That's the mystery of this story. That's the mystery we have to address. Clearly, as Ginny's just passively sitting there and just having conversations with these two people, with Franklin, Selina's brother, and then with his friend Eric, something's happened to change her. What is it? That's the mystery that Salinger makes us solve. So what is Franklin like? The brother. He's gross. He's gross. He's always picking at a scab, scratching at an open something on his leg. He's the goofiest looking boy or man, couldn't tell, boy or man, that she's ever seen. Everything he says is goddamn this, goddamn that. He's bleeding. Stick around. I may need a goddamn transfusion, for Christ's sake, he says. Stick around. I may need a goddamn transfusion. How has he cut himself? He was going to shave, and he was this is in the old days. I started shaving at the very I caught the tail end of the old days, where razor blades lasted you for about 2 or 3 shaves, and then you threw them in the wastebasket. So he cut himself fishing around for something, never says what, fishing around for something in the wastebasket, and he cuts himself on a razor blade that's been discarded there. Yuck. Gross. Everything about him is gross. And by the way, don't fish for stuff in the wastebasket. Anything that's in there you don't want, or you shouldn't want. Right? Gross, gross, gross. But stick around. I may need a goddamn transfusion. I want you to remember that. And then we get his resentment of her sister, Joan the Snob, who didn't answer any of his letters. If you go back and read, because we're going along quickly here, but if you go back and reread this, I've said this before, all of his stuff, pay close attention to the body language. The body language is always so precise that we can visualize the people cinematically, moment by moment, beat by beat. And one just fun thing to pick up is, when does Ginny cross her legs and when does she uncross her legs? And whenever she uncrosses her legs, she's becoming more relaxed and more open and listening. And then whenever she crosses her legs, it's like a little bit more defensive against whatever she's hearing. Okay, don't try to find it now, but it happens a number of times. And he's asking her, okay, what should I put on it? She says iodine, not mercurochrome. And she, yeah, it stings. He says, this is the middle of 45, I don't like it when it stings, he said. And she answers, nobody does. Right? I don't like it when it stings. Nobody does. Right? We see the lesson on dukkha once again. Nobody likes suffering, but everybody does. And how do you get that suffering? How do you get that? Fishing around in that wastebasket. Going down into the crud. You inflict it on yourself. Don't do that. Okay. And then he offers her a half a chicken sandwich. Yeah, it's good. I bought it in a deli last night. Do you want to eat anybody's half-eaten last night deli chicken sandwich, especially from this guy who is just like a walking scab. Ugh. He forces her to take a bite. She says she swallowed with difficulty. Right? Yeah, it's good, she said. And then as soon as she leaves the room, she's looking for somewhere to hide it or discard it. All right. Oh, and we find out, and again, you know, these stories all have these great colorful titles. Just before the war with the Eskimos. He looks out the window, all these fools lining up for the draft. You know, the next war is going to be against the Eskimos, which obviously is not. That's just some weird fantasy. But why the Eskimos? What are Eskimos like? Does anyone ever go to war with the Eskimos? No, because they don't have a problem with anyone. I'm starting to overuse this word, but innocent is the only word I can come up with here. Right? Salinger must have grown up seeing Nanook of the North. Some of you know that great documentary about the sweet, innocent life of the Eskimos. The Eskimos don't hurt anyone, right? So you can see, oh, the next war is going to be against the Eskimos. It's like Franklin in this kind of Salinger code is addressing the futility, the foolishness of war. But of course, Franklin's bitter. Franklin, we find out, actually applied for he was rejected. Bad ticker, bad heart. And maybe a pun here, you know, he's another embittered person like Eloise. Bad heart. His heart has been injured. All right. Okay, then he goes off to shave. This is almost like a play, like we're watching a play, you know, like a French drawing room play. You know, one person exits and another person enters from the other side. Only who comes in now is Eric, this young man wearing a suit and tie. Bottom of page 50. Seen Franklin? He asked. He's shaving. He told me to tell you to wait for him. He'll be right out. Shaving? Good heavens. The young man looked at his... Now, listen to this very closely. Watch all the details. Watch all the body language. He then sat down. The young man looked at his wristwatch. He then sat down in a red damask chair, crossed his legs, and put his hands to his face. As if he were generally weary or had just undergone some form of eye strain, he rubbed his closed eyes with the tips of his extended fingers. This has been the most horrible morning of my entire life, he said, moving his hands from his face. He spoke exclusively from the larynx, as if he were altogether too tired to put any diaphragm breath into his words. Okay, so let me redo this, speaking just from the larynx. This has been the most horrible morning of my entire life. Okay, do you hear that less resonant voice? What kind of chair does he sit down in? Nothing's going to be arbitrary in these stories. Red damask chair. You know, damask is like a flock pattern. Let me put it this way. If this guy were a macho Hemingway hero, he'd be sitting down in a brown leather chair. But he's not. He's something very different. He's something very different that's not being spelled out. Listen to the dialogue. What happened, Ginny asked, looking at him. Oh, it's too long a story. I never bore people I haven't known for at least 1,000 years. And then he goes on to tell the story about, oh God, this person who's been sharing my apartment for months and months. I don't even want to talk about him. This writer, etc., who moved into his apartment and then rolled him for all his possessions. What is going on with this person, Eric, why is he in here? Okay, here comes my favorite line in this whole story. Page 52. And I've mentioned before, smoking. You watch everything about smoking with Salinger. Cigarettes, matches, ashtrays. We're seeing how Franklin smokes, which is this French inhale, this totally adolescent, trick to be proud of oneself, this French inhale method, which, Louisa, you recall that one from high school? I do. You're right. We worked hard at that. Okay, page 52, just above halfway down. This is still Eric. He paused to drag on his cigarette and exhaled the smoke in a thin, sibilant stream from his mouth. Okay, what does the word sibilant mean? Sibilant means making the letter S, as if making the letter S. Now, if you're a macho Hemingway hero, you drag on, or Humphrey Bogart or something, you drag on your, okay, but this is how this guy, watch this closely, how he smokes. That's a thin, sibilant stream. That's right, he's gay. That decodes the whole story. Now go back and listen to his dialogue from the very first thing. Shaving? Good heavens. What happened? Right? This has been the most horrible morning of my entire life. Oh, it's too long a story. I never bore people I haven't known for at least 1,000 years. This person's gay. He knows Franklin from the airplane factory, right? And just before Selena comes back at the top of bottom of 53, Ginny asked him, "You have a bad heart too?" In other words, is that why you were exempted from the army, like Franklin? You have a bad heart too? Heavens no. Knock wood. He rapped the arm of his chair twice. I have the constitution of, and of course he's going to say a horse, but then Selena walks in. Why was Eric rejected from the army? Because he's gay. They didn't take gay people, openly gay people in the army, right? And not every gay person is flamboyant and self-evidently gay, but Eric is. Okay. Which begs the question, why is Franklin going to the movies with Eric? Here's what I think, because we're running out of time. I think Eric has struck out with women. Right? He struck out with Joan the Snob, and he's probably struck out with every woman he's been involved in, for obvious reasons. He's just a slob and a goofball and, a overgrown teenager who can't stop, cussing. So I think he's thinking about, as Seinfeld put it, switching teams. That's what I think. What movie are they going to see? Any movie that Salinger could have picked. It's Cocteau's Beauty and the Beast. Any of you ever seen that? It's great. It's great. It's a classic. You'll see it at art films. If you get the Criterion Channel or something, you'll be able to find it. It's really great. What's the story of Beauty and the Beast? What the Beast is an ugly, gross thing, kind of like Franklin. But what can transform him? What transforms the Beast? When Beauty says, "I love you." Right? Well, isn't that what we all want? Isn't that what we feel can save us from the beastliness, from the grossness, the ugliness of our lives? We're just looking for love. So all of this is being played out in front of Ginny and in front of us, but it's not spelled out, because to spell it out, the job of a great writer like Salinger is to pack all this stuff in here with great subtlety and delicacy and nuance, and then the job of someone like me is to wreck it, like batten the piñata, and to make it spill its guts, spill the contents, and in the process, kind of destroying the outer thing. But hey, that's what I do. But can you see now how we can see how how Ginny has, all this has registered on her. None of it's been lost on her, because now when Selena comes back with the money, she says, no, I don't want it. I don't need it. Something has opened up. Something has happened to open her beyond simply what's mine and what's yours, and some greater opening to generosity, to compassion. And also, maybe we'll get together, right? At the beginning, we're told she considers Selena the biggest drip in Miss Bacehorse School. But now she wants to get together with her. It's like she's been opened up. Her heart's been opened up. Maybe she'll even see this goofy Franklin again. Maybe that's fine. Maybe she's seen, oh, we've all got our road to hope. Poor Uncle Wiggily, right? We've all got our crutch. We've all got our glasses. Selena has to live with this weird brother and this sickly mother. Maybe I can reach out to her. Maybe that's better. Maybe that's how I save myself. Just, how can Eloise save herself? Reach out, say yes to grace. And that takes us to the very end of the story. Page 55, the last paragraph. Outside the building, she started to walk west to Lexington to catch the bus. Between 3rd and Lexington, she reached into her coat pocket for her purse and found the sandwich half. She took it out and started to bring her arm down to drop the sandwich into the street. But instead, she put it back into her pocket. Okay, yeah. Barbara's shaking her head. What? It doesn't make sense. She's not going to eat this gross thing, but somehow she can't bring herself to discard it, to reject it. Why? What is this sandwich? What is this? We've already seen this sandwich is Franklin, right? It's gross like Franklin. It's gross like all of us. I'm not going to reject what was so easy to reject before. I'm going to open to it. And then we get this, whoa, way out of left field, this final sentence. A few years before, it had taken her 3 days to dispose of the Easter chick she had found dead on the sawdust in the bottom of her wastebasket. Now, a few of us here are old enough to remember when for Easter you used to get little cute, sweet little live chicks on Easter. And it was, oh, they're so adorable, going to take care of them and all that. And they always died. It was a terrible idea. That and the little baby alligators from the circus that got flushed down the toilet, and, according to legend, grew to full size and roamed beneath the streets of New York. The Easter chick. Right? It's dead. It's gross. It's done. And yet it took her 3 days to dispose of it. Brian, I'm just going to keep talking here because we're running out of time. Sorry. 3 days. What happens in 3 days after someone dies? Anyone famous who died and then something important happened to him after 3 days? That's right, resurrection. And of course, The crucifixion and the resurrection, if it's about anything important, it's about every one of us. This is what happens to us. What happens to us when we get screwed up, when we screw ourselves up, when we plunge ourselves into suffering, when we cut ourselves off from others, when we close our hearts, as Eloise closes her heart to Lou, to Ramona, to Grace, to herself, to the world. As in a more subtle way, Selena does here, and she's just, keep doing that. Ginny does, nickel and diming Selena about the cab money and making all these assumptions about, oh, they've got servants who serve them tennis balls on a silver platter and all that, and find out, no, the reality is we're all in this boat together. And the one way we can save ourselves is by acknowledging that we're all in this boat together and open our hearts to each other. The fancy Buddhist word for that is bodhicitta. This whole session today has been a sermon on bodhicitta. That's how you do it. Open the heart. And the way you write it is, don't say anything about opening a heart. You craft it into these fascinating stories. Okay? So that's the end of our time here. Please read so next time we get together will be next month. We're going on to what many people believe the best thing Salinger ever wrote, For Esme with Love and Squalor. But please do read Down at the Dinghy. Oh my God, The Laughing Man. It's so good. Maybe we'll get a chance to take a few questions about those next time. Thank you. May all beings find that grace.
Thank you, Dean.